Appreciate everybody coming out. Got a lot of things to cover today. We also have a guest speaker. Um, in fact, we'll probably do that fairly shortly. Let's we've been Tyler Wenrich is here and his father Michael, and they had a horrific experience in the Turks. And I think a lot of you are aware of it, including you may not be. This is a case of being in a foreign country, nearly having a couple of rounds of 9mm that Tyler was totally unaware was impactful. I'll let Tyler tell his story. I will say that his father, Michael, was an outstanding father. He contacted me explaining what was happening. He flew out there and stayed behind his son's side the whole time. He didn't budge. He was going to support him 100%. And I'm sure that greatly helped Tyler get through this one nightmare. Tyler?
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm not a public speaker, so I have a lot of notes that I want to read off of, but I did want to just tell my story, and if it can help somebody, great. And that's kind of what I'm going here. So I want to start by thanking Cole for having me here today. I can try to help people avoid a similar situation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tyler Wenrich. I'm 31 years old. I have a 1.5-year-old son and the wife we might walk in soon, and then made occasionally as see my dad's here today with me, and my family kept in contact with me throughout the whole time that I was down here. I've devoted myself to a career at EMS over the last 12 years, got my paramedic, and moved up to an operations position in the company that I'm with. And in April of this year, I went on a cruise to Grand Turk. Turks and Caicos Islands, also known as TCI. The cruise was with several of my friends, first bachelor party. While packing for the trip, I pulled a backpack out of the deposit that I haven't used in probably a year as my carry-on to fly to where the cruise was. I knew I had used the backpack at the range and to put some emergency supplies in that I kept in my car. So I checked it thoroughly, just like I would for any other trip, to make sure that there was nothing in there, make sure it was empty before I used it. We left Wednesday morning at Richmond International Airport to Miami, Florida. And my backpack was scanned through TSA because I was using it as a carry-on. So I just scanned it through TSA and then got on the plane, went to Miami. And then on Thursday evening, we left for the cruise. Again, my backpack was scanned for security at the cruise port, and I carried that onto the cruise on my back, and while they checked my regular luggage. And we departed Thursday night from the Grand Port. We were at sea for a day, arrived at Grand Turk for a day, and we're planning on leaving that evening around 5 p.m. It was just a couple days at sea and one day at Grand Turk. Took my backpack with me to carry everybody's belongings off of the ship while we were exploring Lamjun. Started the day off with go-kart rides and most of the day at the beach. And my backpack remained on the beach until we headed back to the cruise ship. When we reboarded the cruise ship to leave Grand Turk, the Royal Caribbean security scanned my bag, scanned everyone's belongings coming back onto the ship. So we were on the ship, and they scanned our belongings coming in, and they asked if that was my backpack. We told them yes, and they pulled out one 9mm round out of the backpack. Then they scanned it again, and they pulled another 9mm round out of a small pocket in my backpack. They scanned it the third time and cleared it without it. So my friend and I were shocked at the time. I wasn't sure how they could be there. The security officers was seemingly relaxed about the situation. They took myself, my two roommates, to our room to be searched. The two security officers searched my room and reiterated multiple times that it was just a routine safety check and just to kind of relax and let them get through it. After clearing the room, I was told I would go outside and speak to the TCI law enforcement. So they escorted me off the boat and onto the dock where the TCI officers were waiting. The TCI officers asked me the standard questions to the effect of, if this was my property, then why the bullets were in my possession? And I confirmed it was, and told them it wasn't how they got there, or that they were in my backpack, but I did have a concealed carry back in the States. So while they were having the conversation with Royal Caribbean Security, I noticed the document labeled confidential come off the boat and be handed to one of the detectives. And I asked officers multiple times if I was going to be arrested and what was going on. And he eventually replied yes, and that I didn't need to speak any further or to be used in court. So I made the comment kind of jokingly, but seriously about going to boat jail and not being sent to prison or the jail. They're not quite understanding the gravity of the situation. And he started to guide me down the dock while I watched the cruise ship leave. At this point, I realized how serious the situation was becoming. So I worriedly asked the officer if I could contact my friend on board and my dad back home. I couldn't get through to my dad originally, so I texted him and just said, "Hey, I'm being arrested in the Turks. Supposedly I had 2 9mm rounds in my backpack." And he replied, "Seriously, tell me what you need." And I responded back with the phone number of Grand Turk police station because that's all that I could get out at the time. And at that point, they took all my stuff and I wasn't able to talk to anybody. I was placed in the back of the police car, and the police officer started to allude to how serious the situation was and how seriously they took ammunition and firearm charges. I was still under the hopeful assumption that this would be resolved in a day or two. Once I arrived at the police station, I was escorted inside with what belongings I had from the ship. My only hope and belief at this point was that my dad was working on figuring things out because he was the only one I had contact with. From the holding area that we walked through a set of doors that led to about 5 cells, all of which had concrete bumps, a small 2-foot window in the corner, a toilet that looked unclean, and apparent dried blood and food on the concrete. While being escorted, the officer looked at each cell, seemingly trying to find the cleanest one since I was the only one in jail at the time. And it appeared that none of the cells had been cleaned in a long time, or at least within a decade. I was escorted into one of the cells, walked in, and told that dinner would be coming soon. The officers were very cordial and allowed me after a time to contact my father that evening with their personal things. By this time, my father told me that the lawyer would be calling me the next day, and the embassy should be contacting me as well the next day. I was able to speak to him for a minute or two, and then had to go and get to the night. The first night I slept on bare concrete, had to ask for toilet paper and use my shoes as a pillow while fighting mosquitoes, the noise of the club nearby, and the heat as there was no air circulating or AC. And I still had no idea what was in store. The next day, a representative from the embassy called to check on me. I would later learn the State Department wouldn't be much help in this situation. And I was about to talk with the appointed PCI lawyer when almost instantaneously the lawyer my father had contacted called the police station. The lawyer was able to pat my father, and I could hardly hold back the tears talking with both of them. The lawyer and my father advised that they were coming down Tuesday and would be representing me. Any questions how I was being treated, and the jail did not provide any essentials, including toothbrush, toothpaste, or soap. An officer at my request was kind enough out of his or her pocket to obtain those things for me. And the second night I was able to take a shower, but had to use my own clothes as it happened. Sunday night and Monday night I was on around, only able to make one call in the evening by the hospitality of the officers. Meals were provided, and an officer found a devotional book for me to be able to read, which helped me get through those 2 nights, as there was nothing but new upstairs the walls. I had to fight the heat, the bugs, and an unknown situation as information was scarce. On Tuesday afternoon, my lawyer arrived and we were taken into a room to discuss everything. This is where I learned the gravity of the situation. Anyone caught with either ammo or firearms, no matter how much, faces up to 12 years in prison unless certain exceptional circumstances are found, which is completely up to the judge. I held back my emotions, thinking of my family and what I was potentially facing. The lawyer said the best thing to do was plead guilty, and I would most likely face some jail time, referencing a case in September of the previous year where an American was found with 20 rounds and was convicted of 8 months in jail. I still was not convinced that these were my bullets. However, pleading guilty was the only option. We went upstairs to conduct the police interview, which was the first time I saw the pictures of the ammunition. One full metal jacket, 9mm, and one hollow point 9mm. Realizing and believing that it was mine that after the interview, which was brief and non-descriptive, my dad arrived, and a wave of emotion swept over both of us. We spoke briefly, and he left together since the blast week. Spent another night in jail until Wednesday afternoon when I had my magistrate hearing to push things to the Supreme Court. This is when I realized the unorganized nature of the court system, and at this time I was sent to prison with a hearing date of June 15th. Knowing I would most likely have prison time, I made the decision not to request bail as the time starts at your arrest. My dad wanted me to visit as much as possible and would be staying in TCI the day that it was told. I arrived at the prison, which was very run down and unkept. I was given a trash bag that had everything I could carry, searched, registered, and escorted to my cell. I had to be in quarantine for at least 10 days, so they brought me to a separate section of the prison, which ended up being the solitary area. This section was basically a rectangle comprised of 4 cells on the right and 3 on the left, with a shower area and a hallway in the middle. I was given a mattress pad and put into my cell, thankfully on my own, but surrounded by 12 other inmates. The cell was about 15 feet by 6 feet and was comprised of a concrete foam on the wall, a window with a wood shutter at the end for the outside, a toilet, and a 5-gallon bucket under a wash bucket. I was taunted for a few days, aside from one individual that was initially kind, although my defenses were up. I quickly learned that the 5-gallon bucket was used to wash clothes, wash dishes, fill the toilet to be flushed, all inside the cell. Clothes were to be air dried on the clotheslines inside the cell, and we were subjected to the weather environment, which was hot and mosquito infested. I still had no idea what to expect, and communication was almost non-existent inside. We were allowed 1 phone call a day, which did not always happen, and I was told visitors were allowed Monday through Friday and on the weekends by appointment. Everyone was locked in their cells from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. to the morning. However, anyone in quarantine, which included myself and a few others, only got 1 hour a day outside of their cell. I spent 4 days in jail and 9 days in prison, all of which were highly emotional, full of prayer, reading, solitaire, and journaling. There was basically nothing to do, no sense of time, and it was a period of pure survival and focus on my faith while Dad was working to get me help. I was able to have several visits from my father and limited communication with my lawyer. I learned there were 3 other Americans at the time involved in a similar situation out on bail on the main island that Dad was in contact with. After a series of events, my dad was directly in contact with state representatives and the media. As it was as difficult as it was, I had every intention of staying in prison to reduce my time until he told me things were happening and I needed to get out in order to fight for myself. At this point, my father was in contact with some highly connected individuals in Virginia, the U.S. government, and the other Americans involved. After a long process, I was able to get out on bail with my father on May 10th. I was exhausted and briefly relieved, as this was nowhere near over. The other Americans, Brian and Ryan, had the same lawyer, were on the same island, and had the same judge who were been released. I was alone on Grand Turk, had a different lawyer, a different judge that had never dealt with a case like this. The law since February of this year had changed, and anyone with ammunition or firearms charges were expected to face a minimum of 12 years in prison unless exceptional circumstances were found. Even if exceptional circumstances were found, judges were legally obligated to convict individuals with some time in a fine. It's difficult to go into every event and feeling. However, what followed was weeks of ups and downs, May 14th was a request to expedite everything and was granted after an extensive argument between the prosecution, the lawyer, and the judge. Followed by the arguments being laid out from the prosecution and my lawyer on May 20th, and then sentencing scheduled for May 28th, which would determine my fate. Along with the pressures and anxieties of the unknown, living on Grand Turk for 6 weeks was an experience and a realization of what we have in the United States. Grand Turk is a small island in the TCI, about 7 miles long and 2.5 miles wide. Clean water was obtained from a water station or the grocery store, and food was triple the cost. To give you an idea, a pack of Oreos costs $14, and a pint of milk costs $8. This is an extremely poor and rundown territory with strong, hospitable people. The islanders were empathetic to my situation, and most did not agree with the law. Dad and I stayed in an Airbnb for the weeks that followed, used the bicycle to get around for a while until we obtained a vehicle, and were surrounded by wild donkeys and wild dogs. In the weeks before my sentencing hearing, we were in constant contact with the other Americans, the media, and 2 key members of Virginia, Bob Hood and Chris Snyder, who would become paramount in helping us return. The delegation from the United States comprised of representatives from the United States government, including senators from Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, congressmen from Virginia, Bob Hood, and embassy leaders had flown down to meet with all of us and the TCI government a weekend before my sentencing date and days before Brian's advocate for understanding the accidental nature of the situation and our release. My wife and coworker came down the week prior, and on May 28th, I had my sentencing. By this time, one of the Americans on the other island was released with a fine. This was hopeful, but I still had no insight into what my fate would be, and had to assume this could be the last I would see my family for whatever length of time the judge decided. My wife, father, and I embraced, and I went to seek to hear the judge's delineation, which took about an hour or so. It was my wife's birthday, and the cruise ships in port were a celebration and freedom. As I listened, it was difficult to understand the direction things were going. I was filled with emotion, and at times holding back tears. By the end, he gave a sentence of time served and a $1,000 fine. The sense of overwhelming relief filled the room, and I knew I would finally be able to return home. The road home was not easy, and there were many stories in this entire experience, good and bad. I think of myself as the responsible gunner, however, we are all human. I would never have imagined I would be in this position, and many things don't happen to them. However, there are 3 more Americans involved in this situation as of 2 weeks ago. We are very fortunate in this country to have the freedoms we have. Those freedoms can cause us to become complacent, and it can happen to any of us. We need to be aware and careful how we travel. Knowing my family and friends and strangers took an interest in this issue and were fighting gave me the hope and courage to push on. I am grateful to be able to share this experience, and for everyone that took the time to empathize with my story and act to enact it. Without action, we cannot make a difference in the world, and even the simplest actions can make a huge impact. I want to thank the president, Philip, for recognizing my story and putting it out there, and several members, including Rick Pollock, who reached out to us, put pressure on the TCI to get us home. I would also like to thank everyone that supported me and took the time and energy to make an effort to get home, including Chris Snyder and Bob Good and my family. Without their support and actions, I would not have lived.